writing of Flying with Dad changed everything for me. Dad and I weren't necessarily close. Greatest generation, food on the table, roof over our head, front pew every Sunday in church. We did those things together. So intellectually, I knew he loved me. But the connection that I wanted with him wasn't there. That changed through the writing of the book. I got the dad I always wanted, and he got a daughter that he didn't know he had. And he waited for me to come home to be with him for his final journey. And for me, there can't be anything more sacred than that, than having your father wait, and to be with him when he passed away. It was our weekly chat. And for the first time in his life, he opened up and told me, strangely, a funny, quirky, off-the-wall story about being a B-24 navigator in World War II. If you're willing, start at the beginning. How did you get into the war? And story after story after story started coming out of him, and I wrote them all down. And then 11 years later, thankfully, all of those stories were turned into a book. And that book is called Flying with Dad. In the Second World War, it wasn't known that nightmares were normal. There was battle fatigue. They knew that there was something, that these guys and women were experiencing, but they didn't know what to call it. They didn't know why it happened. So here was Dad living with nightmares when, had he been born 20, 30 years later, he would have been able to receive some help for that. Right. So to have high school kids hear some of that stuff, I think could be really incredibly important. So in my dad's nightmare, his plane was going down and he couldn't get out. He was trying to crawl through a space to get to the bomb bay where he could have dropped out with his parachute, and he kept pulling. But the passageway that he was in was lined with stainless steel, and he couldn't get what they call purchase. He couldn't pull himself through. His nightmares were so bad that he literally dug channels in the mattress, is to be able to hear someone else's story. And the feedback that I've gotten from Flying with Dad is that for many of the second generation of children whose fathers were in the war and their dads never said anything, even though their father might have been a Marine or in the Navy, reading my book gives them a sense of who their father was and what their father was all about. The immediate thing that came to mind was God, because I truly believe that all of the experiences I've had in life, all of the careers that I've had in life, being a teacher, being a psychotherapist, working in a retirement community, it was God's plan for me to get to know my dad in that very intimate way and to share my story with the public by writing the book. But there comes a time, I think, that all of us need to ask open-ended questions. Mom, what was it like when you were a kid? What were some of the things that you faced that weren't good? Or what are some of your favorite stories? And sit back and listen, because that will help you to understand those folks that you call your parents. Take on the fact that there are going to be times when it's just difficult. And so what I've found is that if I get through the difficulty, doesn't mean that I like it, doesn't mean that it isn't hard, but if I get through it, more times than not, there's something really profound that I'm going to learn. There is a blessing that's going to come out of it. How do you want to live until you die?